direction. A long campaign is now.
This is the car market in Mogadishu.
NATO's military success against
many Western nations.
This is On Assignment.
Hello everyone and welcome to On Assignment, taking you inside VOA reporting around the world. I'm Alex Villarreal.
And I'm Philip Alexio. Just ahead, Kurdish teens missing in Turkey. But are they PKK victims or volunteers?
Then you've heard of smartphones and smart cars, but what about smart roads?
Banned in China, the Falun Gong spiritual group turns to the internet to spread its story.
And plastic. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, but a major environmental headache.
Don't go away. On Assignment starts right now. In Turkey, a growing number of Kurdish families are accusing Kurdish rebel group, the PKK, of abducting their children. Some of the missing were as young as 14 when they disappeared.
But the PKK, which has been fighting the government for decades, describes the situation differently. Reporter Dorian Jones spoke with some of these families in Turkey's mostly Kurdish southeast, and he shares with me what he uncovered.
In the sweltering summer heat, a group of families hold a daily vigil for their children, who they claim in the past few months were abducted by the Kurdish rebel group, the PKK. Each carries a photograph of their child. Some are as young as 14 years old when they disappeared.
What's behind these claims of abduction?
Well, most of these teenagers are quite young, 15, 16-year-olds. Some are a little bit older than that. And most of them, there's at least a couple of dozen or so that have, according to their parents, have been kidnapped by the PKK, this Kurdish rebel group that's been fighting the Turkish state for 3 decades or so, and they say they were abducted and being forced to join their ranks. And they said, and most of these alleged abductions happened in the last few months. Usually, the children were on their way to school, and the parents said that these children were abducted by PKK rebels and taken across the border to neighboring Iraq. Among them, it isn't just boys; there are also girls as well.
But not everyone believes that these are, in fact, kidnappings, correct? I mean, there are even pro-Kurdish groups that say the teens joined the PKK voluntarily.
Well, that's right. All the groups that are the main political party that is fighting for more Kurdish rights, the pro-Kurdish BDP, and many other NGOs that are sympathetic to the Kurdish rights movement, have dismissed these claims. They said that these children have gone to the mountains like thousands of young Kurdish youths have in the last 3 decades. There is a great deal of support in this region, especially amongst the youth for the PKK. They see them as an organization that has fought for the Kurdish minority in Turkey and fought and achieved many rights that they now enjoy. And they say that among the youth, there is this dream, as it were, that, when they get old enough, they want to go, as it were, go to the mountains, which is a euphemism for joining the PKK.
And Dorian, what's the role of the government in this in terms of the people, the one camp that says these kids were taken against their will, the other camp that says no, they went on their own?
Well, the government have seized this. I mean, they have said that this is a disgrace. They've been very tough, especially the Prime Minister. He's made this a very personal issue. He's spoken in many meetings condemning what he said are these kidnappings. He's also attacked the main pro-Kurdish party for not doing anything about it. He's been using this to beat, as it were, the pro-Kurdish movement, and has very much sided with these parents, particularly the mothers. He met several mothers recently. He certainly has taken up their cause on this, and he really has thrust this to the top of the political agenda for several weeks.
And Dorian, you mentioned the peace process. How has this issue affected that process, and what's the future of this?
It hasn't done that much good to the peace process because the Prime Minister has used this as an opportunity to attack the pro-Kurdish movement and to raise the political temperature. He is running for president at the moment in presidential elections next month. So it is seen as a way of rallying his Turkish nationalist base. So it has add a little more tension to the peace process. And there is tension with this because on the Kurdish side, they feel there isn't enough progress being made. Pro-PKK people I've spoken to have said that there's been no movement at all since they've had this ceasefire. So that, on their side, whereas on the government side, they're saying that the PKK hasn't committed itself to its full withdrawal from Turkey. So there's recriminations on both sides. But having said that, it does seem that both sides still want to pursue this. They do see this as an important process. So it hasn't helped, but at the moment, both sides seem to be committed to following this process.
All right, that was Dorian Jones reporting for the Voice of America. Our thanks, of course, to Dorian.
Time for a short break, but when we come back, we're going to hit the road. But it's not just any road. You're watching On Assignment. How would you drive if you could tell there was trouble ahead before you saw it? Maybe your car could warn you of a pedestrian crossing ahead that you don't know about. Well, researchers in Virginia are working on these advances on what's called a smart road. So we decided to bring in our smartest reporter at the Voice of America, Carolyn Pursuti, to tell us what this smart road is all about. What is a smart road?
So a smart road, Smart Anchor, is actually a test road. So if you can imagine a 3.5 kilometer stretch of highway. Looks like a regular highway. It has the berm the same, it has the lines the same, it has overhead lighting, traffic signals, bridges, and it's there that they test new equipment for cars and how cars talk to that new equipment.
Okay, so we obviously have a whole lot of advancements in cars, and so this is sort of adding advancements on the road or around the road with signals so they can interact and communicate with each other.
Exactly.
And so what about if there's people on the side of the road and I'm driving my car, for example? Is there some sort of signal way that they can alert me that something is ahead?
That's right. If there's a pedestrian crossing the road ahead, there are sensors along the highway that can alert your car so that you'll have a beeping sound that'll be emitted from what looks like a GPS on the dashboard. It's that shape. And so say there's a construction worker that's putting out cones, then you'll know that there's somebody ahead that you're going to have to swerve around or slow down for.
So I guess, do the people have to actually be outfitted as well if they're on the road, like the construction worker guy?
Exactly. Right now it's in a backpack. So the backpack has a GPS antenna that talks to the devices along the side of the road that talk to the car. But eventually it'll be incorporated into the construction vest. So very lightweight, very, very transportable.
And so they also, as I understand, they have a way of conducting all sorts of weather condition testing sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. This is fascinating with the Smart Road. They have 75 different weather towers that can create rain, snow, or fog. So on the day that we were there, I requested a downpour, just really drenching the road. And
ruin everybody's day.
It's almost as if you can order the weather, right. You know. But we wanted to show the visibility. So, you know, if you're driving and you have this downpour and you have the windshield wipers going, then how does that cut down on the visibility for different colors of lighting? So they're going from amber lights, which we've used in the past for overhead lighting, to white lights. So they're testing all this out with different pavement on the roadway to see how quickly you can stop. All kinds of tests are being done on this roadway.
And are they looking that maybe where at some point down the road this is going to be equipment that's interacting with the car that I guess ends up being mandatory?
Yes, they're hoping that. Because they say if it's not mandatory, we won't cut down on injuries and deaths on our highways. So they are hoping that it will be mandatory in the cars themselves. And they're testing it out too. Not too far from here.
And so, and you are using, once again, Google Glass for this report, which seemed to come in handy. You're also the Google Glass expert around here now.
Well, we decided to put it on the driver, you know, so you can actually see what the driver sees on this smart road. And we decided to put the Google Glass on the construction worker too, so you could see how close the cars came to her as they're zooming by.
So not only are the cars talking to us, the cars are now going to be talking to the roads, and they're going to be interacting so everybody's safe and sound. All right, VOA's Carolyn Pursuti, the smartest reporter here at the Voice of America. Thanks a lot, Carolyn.
Thank you, Phil.
All right, time for a short break, but on the other side, Falun Gong, China, and the internet. You're watching On Assignment.
Falun Gong is a spiritual movement that began in China in the 1990s. Followers practice meditation and slow stretching to promote spiritual awakening. The group says it's non-political and not a religion, but China has attacked it and other similar movements as dangerous superstition.
In the face of China's ban on the group, a ban that extends to the internet, Falun Gong has been working on software to get around censorship. VOA's Jerome Sokolovsky tells me about Falun Gong members here in Washington who've been trying to share their story inside China.
Practitioners of Falun Gong regularly meditate on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. Falun Gong is a spiritual movement with Buddhist and Taoist influences and is banned in China. So about a decade ago, software engineer John Yu and other members began developing technology to get around Beijing's online restrictions.
Jerome, how successful has John Yu and maybe some others been in developing this software evasive technology?
Well, John isn't involved in the project anymore. It's now being conducted from a secret location, presumably here in the United States. But they have been successful. There are people not just in China, but Iran and other closed countries who are using this software to access the web just like the rest of us can do.
Initial purpose was to feed the free information regarding Falun Gong, what Falun Gong is and Falun Gong is not. And also the persecution into China so that people are more aware of what's going on with the Falun Gong group.
The result was a series of software programs that allow millions of users in China and other repressive countries to surf the web anonymously.
Are a lot of other religious groups around the world just sort of tapping into the same thing where they have their own developers trying to create the ability for people to go online and share their religion with one another and do it anonymously?
Well, religious groups in general are discovering the power of the internet because it's a place where more and more people are sharing their faith and talking about their beliefs. What we have is religious groups in the United States now seeing the potential of a free internet, and they call it the Berlin Wall, the Iron Curtain of the 21st century, the restrictions that are being put on the internet in some countries, that those are preventing free expression, free practice of religion. So what they're doing is they're asking Congress to fund more development of this anti-censorship software. And of course, Congress is ordering VOA and other government broadcasters to fund that development.
Now, on the other side, when it comes to China, other governments around the world, there's obviously this concern. They don't want this stuff. What is their reason for it other than maybe repressing a group? There are other things involved here.
Well, there's always the concern in China, in other places, a lot of Muslim countries, where there's a fear that these techniques are just being used by evangelical Christian groups in the United States or other kinds of evangelical groups that want to spread their faith. And so they see it as a kind of foreign influence, whether it's religious or not. However, the interesting thing that I found out in this story, talking to some of these evangelicals, is not so much that they want to convert people to their faith in these countries, but there are people already in these countries who are Christian, mostly Christian, maybe other faiths too, who need to know about the theology, who want to learn about their own faith, and they can't because they can't access material on the web and they can't go to a local church and find out there.
And this expert that you spoke with, I guess it was Brian Grimm from the Religious Freedom and Business Foundation, and he was talking about these circumnavigating controls, and I guess he mentioned something about, he mentioned the word spying in his answer. Well, explain what he was sort of getting at.
It was an interesting point from him. I mean, he's very much in favor of an open internet, and he has done a lot of research showing that religious freedom in countries is associated with economic growth and economic prosperity. But so he had a little caution, though, for American groups who are becoming associated with a US government policy that's aimed at circumventing controls. And he says groups should be a bit cautious about that because it can be seen in those countries as a kind of spying. If you have religious groups that have activities or are trying to have activities overseas, that could be seen in those countries as with some concern or some alarm. And I spoke to a pastor from a Chinese church in suburban Washington, and his videos are being seen in China via, many people use the Falun Gong software to access his videos. And he says, for us it's essential that this internet censorship be lifted, because it would be very helpful in just simply educating people about their own beliefs.
VOA's religion reporter Jerome Sokolovsky. Well, moving on now to our next story. It is pretty hard to imagine a world without plastic. It pretty much does everything. It keeps our food fresh. It can even protect medicine. It's in all kinds of consumer products that we use, including electronics and even pens like this one, Alex.
But plastic is also a major global environmental headache, polluting roads and waterways. VOA's Roseanne Skirble sat down with me to talk about this plastic problem and what's being done about it.
First of all, I want you to know, and our listeners to know, that plastics is great. It's revolutionized our world. It keeps our food fresh. It protects medicine. But it's in everything from electronics to fountain pens. And it's a $374 billion industry in the United States alone. However, what happens is a lot of the plastics, especially the disposables, are ending up in our creeks, in our rivers and waterways, first on our roads, and then they move their way into our oceans. This same story plays out globally every single day. A trail of plastic washes from roads and sidewalks into streams and rivers, eventually making its way to beaches and oceans. It accumulates and never goes away. That's because it's synthetic and does not biodegrade. It just simply breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces, says Nancy Wallace, who heads the Marine Debris Program for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Humans cause the problem, and humans can solve it, she adds.
By using less single-use items, by recycling our items, by disposing of those properly and making sure that they're going where they should be going, we can really make a huge difference. It's really about caring about the environment and knowing that we are the ones that impact it.
And speaking of some of these plastics that we find in our waterways, you have some items here today.
Yes, I had the great fortune of going on a cleanup on the Mississippi River, one of the largest river systems in the world. And these are two items that I brought back with me, both plastic. One very much a symbol, Mickey Mouse, a symbol of the United States. And the other belonged to a doll. I just got her foot. But I rescued her foot from becoming debris in the ocean.
Right, because you have, any fish or other animal could swallow this.
Well, not only swallow this, but what happens to this? This is plastic, let's go back to basics.
Yeah.
Plastics is synthetic. It doesn't biodegrade. Anyway, what happens to it is it breaks down into smaller and smaller bits. And these smaller and smaller bits are then ingested in the fish, and then it just travels up the food chain. And eventually we go to our supermarket and we purchase the fish. We trust that the fish don't have plastic in them, but some of the chemicals that are from the plastic or leach onto the chemicals that are already in the ocean, can go into the fish.
What's the solution here then? This UN report, they have an idea, right?
The United Nations Environment Assembly in Nairobi put out a report, the one that you're referring to is called Valuing Plastic, and it made the business case for plastic. For example, cuts down costs by using more efficient energy sources to make the plastic, cutting down costs by promoting recycling and end of use and reuse of plastic, showing that it makes the company money to do that. Also, it puts the company in a better light with consumers. Consumers want to know that the companies are doing the best thing for the environment. They want them to consider what they call the plastic footprint. just like you would consider a carbon footprint.
Right.
From CO2 gases. They want businesses to consider the products that they make and the footprint that they're making and the impact that they're making, and take that information and go and make some changes in what they're doing.
What about the individual's role in this? What can we do?
Oh, there are a number of things. First of all, we won't have a problem or any bigger problem if we all take responsibility for not littering. Literally not throwing the plastic containers, the plastic bags. 1% of those are recycled, of those plastic bags. Clean up your beach. I mean, how did I get these plastic things? I went on a cleanup. Not that I want these things, but they are a symbol of what's going, what's coming out and not being picked up. In Hawaii, there was a beach cleanup that recovered 600 kilograms of, and this is just in one day, of trash that included, almost 200,000 plastic fragments of things like this. Bottles, toothbrushes, refrigerator doors, all these things. If we don't throw them away, they won't go into the ocean.
And again, that was VOA's Roseanne Skirble. Now, speaking of trash troubles, the U.S. city of Baltimore, Maryland is no stranger to this struggle. Plastic and other trash from the city's streets can easily end up in the harbor, the Chesapeake Bay, and eventually the Atlantic Ocean. But Baltimore is tackling this problem in a unique way.
Well, a one-of-a-kind device is pulling this trash out of the water soon after it goes in, and doing so very effectively. VOA's Deborah Block has the story of this new machine based on a very old design.
This odd-looking contraption sits on the Jones Falls River that flows into Baltimore's harbor. Every year, storm runoff from city streets carries huge amounts of garbage and debris into the river, polluting the harbor. Adam Lindquist is with the Waterfront Partnership of Baltimore, the group that sponsored the Water Wheel.
After a rainstorm, we would get a lot of trash in Baltimore Harbor. Sometimes the trash was so bad it looked like you could walk across the harbor on nothing but trash.
Containment booms funnel trash and debris toward the gadget, where a leaf rake pulls it in and onto a moving conveyor that drops the garbage into a dumpster. The dumpster is on a floating dock that can be pulled to shore by boat, where the waste is burned to create electrical energy. The water wheel is more efficient than the way the garbage was being picked up, using small boats with nets. Daniel Chase, co-designer of the device, says it can remove 45,000 metric tons of garbage each day.
Instead of chasing one or two pieces of trash around at a time, we just stand at the source of it and catch it all at once.
Chase says the garbage comes from people who throw litter on the ground instead of putting it into bins.
Plastic bottles and styrofoam plates and cups.
The water wheel uses renewable energy, mostly river current, but when needed, also energy from solar panels.
It is run on water, so it's either river current pushing from underneath, or we are pumping water onto it, which then fills buckets to carry the wheel around.
The rotation of the water wheel also provides other benefits by putting oxygen back into the river and thus improving the water quality.
The real cure is not the water wheel. The real cure is not littering. And the best I can tell, that's done by educating children.
Deborah Block, VOA News, Baltimore.
Well, that is it for us. It's time for us to clean up our own recyclables here and get out of here.
Absolutely. But before we go, we want to invite you to visit us at facebook.com/VOA on assignment. And we'd like you to go on there and tell us what you might like to learn from our VOA reporters.
Yes, if there is a story of particular interest to you in your part of the world, let us know how you would like to see it covered.
Of course, you can always find our show on the Programs tab of our global news website, voanews.com.
Thanks so much for watching. So long from Washington.